Hey y'all, how's it growing? Welcome back to my channel. This is Everyday Gardening with Erica, and I am coming to you outside by the container garden in this beautiful morning. The sun's tucked away behind the clouds, so I'm able to actually come out here and do a video. I tried so hard last night to get a video out, but it was so windy, there was no way I was gonna get this done. So I am happy to be out this morning and talk to you guys about our part 3 of our series for beginner tips for gardening. So if you haven't already watched part 1 and part 2, I highly encourage you to do that first, because there is a rhyme and reason to the order of which I do these videos. So in part 1 and part 2, we talked about things like frost dates and your planting zones, and then the different types of gardening, like container gardening versus in-ground gardening. But today we are going to jump into what I think is the secret ingredient to a successful and prosperous and abundant garden, and that would be your soil. The soil is where it's at. All the other things are great, obviously watering, sunlight, the plants, the type of plants that you get, all those are great. But I think that if you really want it to work, it's gonna have to be what's in the ground. That's where your plants feed, that is where your plants thrive. And if you don't have the right soil, it's just not gonna work. So let's jump into what you need for the soil. It really kind of depends slightly on the type of gardening that you're going to do. When I say slightly, let me caveat that. All your soil pretty much needs to have the same ingredients. It needs to be fluffy and loose. It needs to have good nutrients in the soil. It needs to have proper drainage, and all that is important. It means that depending on how you garden, whether it be in your containers or in ground, it just depends on how you amend your soil. So if you're going to be in a container, which most people do, especially starting out, what I recommend is that you use potting soil to start. No other soil will work, especially for your baby plants, whether it's a plant start that you buy at the store or you actually do seedlings. Potting soil, as I mentioned in a previous video, has all the ingredients that you need to start off on the right foot. So it gives your plants that boost that it needs. It comes with all the nutrition, it comes with the fluffiness of the soil and the things that make it fluffy. So that way your plants have a fighting chance to really take off. Potting soil is where it's at. If you use, like, say, topsoil or garden all-purpose soil, what's going to happen is it doesn't have a lot of the ingredients to keep it fluffy, so your seeds or your plants are going to get real compacted every time that you water, and it's not going to have a chance to spread its roots or to grow. So potting soil is where it's at. After your potting soil, a few weeks in, you probably want to start fertilizing it, and there's a couple of organic fertilizers. We'll talk about that in a minute. But your soil is really important. If you do in-ground gardening, then it really depends on what your soil is, right? So I mentioned in the earlier video that my soil is primarily sand, which is really strange again to me. I don't know why I'm still blown away by that, because I don't live by the beach. But anyway, sand. Sand does not retain water very well. It just runs off. So what I need to do if I'm gonna plant in ground is I need to amend the soil with maybe some all-purpose garden soil, in addition to some of the things that I need to make it fluffy and airy. Maybe some peat moss, maybe some of that organic coconut stuff that is in place of peat moss, maybe some perlite, in addition to some compost, because compost is what feeds the plant. So I'd have to put in a lot more into my soil in order for it to have what it needs to flourish. Whereas opposed to a potting soil that you buy, is already going to have all that stuff in it. So for beginner gardeners, potting soil is great because you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. If you're going to do raised beds, it's much like container gardening, just on a grander scale. If you go out to, say, Lowe's, Home Depot, or your garden center to buy those big bags of potting soil, it's going to get pretty expensive because you have to buy quite a bit of bags in order to fill that bed. So go down to your nearest garden center or somewhere that sells raised bed soil in bulk, so you can buy it by the truckload. That's the most economic way to do it. I would definitely ask what's in that soil, and most of the time they will tell you the percentages of what is in that soil, so that way you can do your research and figure out what else you need to add, if anything. But you definitely need to add some food to that as well. So compost is really good to add in addition to that raised bed soil. So that's a lot of information, I know, on soil, but again, we're talking about for beginners, right? So beginners potting mix is where it's at. If you can get organic potting mix, then that would be what I would highly recommend, but it's not detrimental if you can't find it. I couldn't find it, and so I had to use Miracle-Gro potting mix. But I'm sure all the organic gardeners out there were just cringing when I used it, because the reasoning behind that is you're growing food, and a lot of the non-organic mixes, you don't really know what's in it, what chemicals they use. I've also heard that the chemicals and the things that they use in those formulas are really great to boost your plant initially, but after that it just kind of goes blah. So it's not really a long-lasting nourishing type of soil, whereas organic, you know exactly everything in there is something that will be fed to your fruits and vegetables, and you feel comfortable consuming those things. But again, it's do your research, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Honestly, I would have loved to have done organic, but I just couldn't find it where I'm at, and that's something that I'm going to push for maybe next spring. But don't let you not finding organic soil stop you from growing something, because it is such a wonderful, beautiful experience, and you get a lot of satisfaction in the process, as well as in the reward of harvesting your first fruits and vegetables. So don't let that stop you. It's still good for you, much better than probably what you buy at the store, honestly, and it definitely tastes better, especially with things like tomatoes. So highly encourage you to start. So soil is definitely important. If you are a researcher, do as much research as you can in order to really get a good grip on what you're putting into the soil. But if that's not you, or you're just overwhelmed by information, potting mix. That would be my recommendation. Okay, in addition to soil, your plant needs sunlight. I would say the average plant needs about 6 hours of sunlight. What I have discovered in my zone, which is very, very hot, a zone 8B, is that the evening sun is detrimental to my plants. So if I can position my garden or my plants in a way that they don't get that hot, intense evening sun, then I'm gonna do it. So behind me, I don't know if you recognize the slight change, but I actually moved these garden plants from the back of the house to the side of the house. And the reason is because the back of the house was receiving that intense evening sun. In the spring, it was great, but now that it's starting to get a lot warmer, which I think we're already in summer, to be honest with you, it was just too much. Every time I'd go out, my plants looked like they were extremely thirsty and they were on the verge of dying, even though I watered them. So if you can avoid that intense evening sun, I would recommend that if you're in the warmer climates. Obviously, in the colder climates, you probably want that evening sun, because it gives your plants the sun that they need. But 6 hours of sun, that's pretty much average. But check the planting instructions anytime that you're buying those plant starts, and make sure that if they're really more shade-loving plants, that you put them in the right spot. Or if they're really primarily all sun, like peppers love sun, then you put them in a space where they get lots of that sun. So pay attention to the sunlight. Watering. If you're going to water your plants, make sure that you're consistent in your watering. So one of the tips that I will share with you when you're watering and you're not really sure how often to water is to check the soil. Put your finger in there and mix it around in the soil and see how dry it is. You'll know if it needs water or not. But if you can't tell by looking, definitely do that test. But I would say consistent watering is another important thing to note, because if you're inconsistent, then your fruits and vegetables are going to be inconsistent in how they grow. So like tomatoes will get deformed, or they'll split, or you'll have root vegetables that will grow deformed because they're not getting what they need. So make sure that you're on a routine schedule when you're watering. If you're hand watering, then you have to have a lot more discipline than you would if you have some sort of like drip system or irrigation system. Again, most beginner gardeners don't have that luxury or have that knowledge just yet, so you hand water because you're doing containers or you have a small space, and that is totally fine. Hand watering is another part of what brings that satisfaction, that reward, because you feel like you're helping the plants grow, you're giving them what they need. So do it. Hand watering is, I like hand watering, honestly. but just make sure you do it pretty consistently. What else? Fertilizing. So if you're going to fertilize your soil, which you need to do, get that on a routine as well. I would say the average is about every 2 to 3 weeks. Just pay attention to what fertilizer you get, on what the instructions are and how often you should do it. It also breaks it down by what you're watering. So if you're fertilizing like roses or any type of flowers, there's how often you're supposed to fertilize for them. If you're doing root vegetables, then there's a time frame of how often you should be fertilizing them, trees and all shrubs, all that. So they usually break it down for you. I'm going to post a picture of the fertilizer that I use. It's that fish emulsion, which a lot of people who do organic gardening highly recommend. It stinks, okay? I'm just gonna be honest with you, it stinks, but it is really good for the plants and they love that stuff. So you mix it in with the water, and then you water in like you would normally water your plants. So definitely recommend the fish emulsion. I've done it, I've used it. Every time that I've done it, I've noticed there's been a boost of growth in all of my plants. There are a couple of other organic options that are out there, so look for those. It'll say on the package organic, but if you can't find it, again, don't let that hinder your ability to get a garden started. This is all a learning experience. It's like the classroom of life, okay? And you have to learn to be patient because not everything grows right away. So let's talk about plants that grow right away, because one of the challenges I think for beginner gardeners is that patience piece. You know, you get excited, you buy all the stuff, you want to plant stuff, and you want to see things sprout up quickly or produce something quickly. I would say the majority of the fruits and vegetables probably don't go that quickly, but there are a few well-known plants that do grow pretty fast and give you that immediate satisfaction that you so desire. So if you want to feel successful, here's a couple of things I would recommend that you start planting. I would recommend that you plant radishes, and every YouTuber that is out there that talks about gardening talks about planting radishes. Man, I don't even know what the days to germination are, but it is like within days you'll see something sprout out of the ground. Radishes, you're like, ew, I don't like radishes, I don't eat them in my salads. Interesting thing about radishes that I've heard, now I have not tried this, so I don't know if this is good or not, but I am definitely going to try this. I have heard that if you like cut quarter your radishes, put a little olive oil, a little salt and pepper, and you roast them, it completely changes the texture and the taste of the radish. So it's not that bitter, crisp vegetable that you probably are familiar with. So I would definitely try it, one, because they're fast and you'll feel really great about yourself starting out in the garden. And two, because there's a different way to eat them that a lot of people don't realize. So try roasting those radishes and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear from any of you that have actually done that. Another quick growing, I would say tomatoes are pretty quick to grow. Keep them fed and watered, and for an indeterminate tomato, for those of you that don't know, that means what it implies. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. There's no determination of height. It'll surpass how tall you are if you keep feeding it and treating it right and pruning it like you're supposed to. So that's a really fun plant, fast growing plant. I think potatoes are pretty fast growing personally. I don't know if any other gardeners feel that way, but every time that I've planted potatoes, they have poked through the ground pretty quickly, and then the other satisfaction is the tops of them grow really, really tall. So I feel really good looking at the potato garden thinking, okay, I did this. So potatoes, I think, are another one. Let's see, what are some other ones? My peppers have been pretty good, but I planted those from seeds, so those seem like they took a really long time. And I planted those in the cell trays at the end of January, and you know, you can see behind me that we're starting to get some fruit here. And I'll give you a garden tour here pretty soon of what those look like, but the peppers have been really satisfying as well. If I can think of anything else, I'll post that on the video on the screen so you can get an idea of what else you could try. But again, for beginner gardeners, you know, at this point in this season, it's too late to really start direct sowing or planting. No, not direct sowing, I take that back. At this point in the season, it's too late to start your seeds, like the ones that you're supposed to start like in January, months before you actually put them into the ground. But there are some direct sow things that you could do now, like sunflowers would be a great time to direct sow those. And those grow really quick too, by the way. And those are fun for the garden. And then I would say the other thing that is a direct sow, zinnias, which are great for the pollinators. You can direct sow. You can direct sow your squash. You can direct sow your cucumbers. What else? Beans, any type of beans, like pole beans, the green beans, the lima beans, all those can be directly sown. So you can do those now, but any of the like small start seeds that you'd have to do months before you put them in the ground, that's past. So you'll have to go down to your local garden center or a grocery store that has a garden center and get those plant starts. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how I started. I just bought a bunch of plant starts and figured it out. And then I tried the seed thing this year and learned some things along the way. So I definitely don't discourage you from doing that. And you know, you can bypass all the hard work of waiting for that seed to sprout and get big enough for you to put into the ground. So buy a bunch of them, put them in the ground and figure it out. That's the fun part of gardening. Anyway, I think I've covered pretty much everything. We talked about water, we talked about soil, we talked about the sunlight, we talked about fertilizing. So the next step is for you just to get started. So I'm really excited. If this is your first time jumping into gardening like it was for me last year, oh fly. I'm really excited for you because there's a lot of great lessons to be learned, and it's very satisfying and rewarding when you actually grow something. You're like, wow, I did this. I don't have a black thumb. By the way, I used to believe the same things that many of you believe. Oh, I have a black thumb, I can't grow anything, I kill everything I touch. No, I don't think that that's true. I think that everybody can grow something. It's what you put your time and attention to, right? And if you're really into something, you're passionate about something, you tend to do a lot of research about it, you tend to give it a lot of attention and care, and gardening is no different. And so I used to kill everything that I touched, and I think it was really because I never really dedicated the time and attention that I needed for it to be successful. And when I really put my mind to it and I just went all in, I might have killed a few things, but that was because I didn't know how to properly care for it. But then I learned, and then you know, all the other stuff that I did not kill was really exciting. So I'm excited for you. You guys jump into it. Let me know in the comments, you know, if you're new to this or if you've been doing this for a little while, any tips that you can share with me. I am all ears. I want to hear from you because that's where I learn. We learn from each other. And if there's any questions that you might have, reach out to me and I'll share any knowledge that I have with you. But now's the time to do it, right? Okay guys, well that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the part 3 of our series. That's the end of our series. I encourage you to watch part 1 and part 2 as well. And next time we chat, I'll probably be giving you a mini garden tour and letting you know what's going on in this container garden of mine. I hope you guys have a great and wonderful day and rest of your week. Until next time, bye guys.